So you did it. After what was probably a very long fight, you've got a court ruling in your favor against ANSES. And look, first off, congratulations! That's a huge victory. But if you're watching this, you probably have this little nagging feeling that this isn't quite the end of the road. And you know what? You're right. Okay, let's dive into the next and absolutely crucial battle, actually getting paid. This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? You won the lawsuit, so does that mean the money is on its way? Well, in a perfect world, yeah, it would be. But as so many retirees find out the hard way, having a favorable ruling is one thing, and having that cash in your bank account is something else entirely. I think the best way to frame this is to think of it like this. That court sentence, that was the end of one major battle, but it wasn't the end of the war. Now, the next phase begins. The campaign to actually execute that ruling. The whole process of making sure that victory on paper turns into real, actual money in your pocket. Okay, before we get into all the problems and roadblocks, let's take a quick look at how this is supposed to work. This is the ideal payment process, the smooth path that, well, unfortunately, isn't always the one that gets followed. It should really be a pretty straightforward four-step deal. First, the court officially lets ANSYS know about the final ruling. Second, ANSYS gets everything in order and makes the bank deposit. Third, you pop over to the bank and collect your retroactive pay. And finally, your monthly pension payment gets adjusted to the correct, higher amount from then on. Simple, right? And the payment itself usually comes in two distinct parts. First, you get the back pay, the retroactivo, which is all the money you were owed from the past. That comes all at once, in a single lump sum. Then, your regular monthly pension, your haber mensual, is permanently adjusted to the new higher amount starting the very next month. Now, please pay very close attention to this number. It is critical. Once ANSES deposits that retroactive payment, the bank is only required to hold on to those funds for 20 days. If you don't collect it within that little window, the bank sends it right back to ANSES. And then, you're stuck starting a whole new process, just to request a repayment. So the takeaway here is, you've got to be ready to act fast. And speaking of acting fast, you also need to know who can actually collect the money, because the rules here are incredibly strict. The only person who can just walk into the bank and collect that retroactive payment is you, the retiree, with your ID. Your normal representative, the apoderado, who might pick up your monthly pension for you, they are not authorized for this. The only way someone else can do it is with a very powerful and specific legal document called a general power of attorney. Okay, so that was the ideal sunny day scenario, but what happens when things don't go according to plan? What do you do when that deadline comes and goes and there's still no money in the bank? This, my friends, is where the second battle truly begins. So at this point, you and your lawyer will kick off what's known as a pension execution, or ejecución provisional. Now, this isn't a whole new lawsuit. It's a specific legal process designed for just one thing: to force ANSYS to comply with the court order they've been ignoring, whether they haven't paid at all or have only paid you part of what you're owed. Here is your trigger for action. This is the key moment. If 30 days have passed since the ruling became final and that back pay has not been deposited, it's time for your lawyer to go right back to the judge. They'll inform the court that ANSYS isn't complying and then formally request an embargo, which is basically a court order to seize the funds directly from ANSYS's accounts to pay you. Now, even when you start this execution process, don't expect ANSYS to just roll over. They often deploy a set of pretty common legal arguments to try and delay or avoid payment altogether. So let's break down their playbook so you know exactly what might be coming. The first defense they might throw at you is claiming the statute of limitations has run out, that you somehow waited too long to demand your payment. But the courts are really clear on this. The Civil Code gives you a full 10 years from the date of the final ruling to execute a pension-related sentence. It's a defense that almost always fails, but they still try it. This next one is a little bit of legal jargon. It's called inability of titulo. Basically, ANSYS argues that a ruling against the state is just declarative. It just states a fact, but it isn't a direct order to pay. The Supreme Court, however, has consistently rejected this argument. They've essentially said that the state is not above the law. A court sentence is a mandate, and it must be fulfilled, period. And another common tactic is the exception of payment, where ANSYS just flat out claims they've already paid you. But for this to work, they have a really high bar to clear. The payment has to be total, not just partial, and they have to prove it with official bank documents, not just their own internal spreadsheets or lists. The burden of proof is 100% on them. All right, let's shift gears for a minute and talk about a very practical and important topic: your lawyer's fees. Understanding how this all works is really key to managing the final steps of this very long process. You'll often see the phrase costas por su orden in the court ruling. What does that mean? Well, it simply means that each party pays their own legal costs. ANSYS pays its lawyers, and you pay yours. So the crucial thing to remember is that the payment for your lawyer's hard work comes from you, and it's typically calculated as a percentage of the money you recover. Now, the law does set some limits here, which is important. For that initial administrative process, the fees are capped at a maximum of 2 months of your pension benefit. For the lawsuit itself, it's usually based on a percentage you both agreed to in a fee agreement beforehand. And there are other specific caps for just collecting the back pay. This whole structure is really designed to protect you, the retiree. But what happens if there's a dispute over the fees? This is where a really important landmark ruling, known as the Gamboa case, comes into play. The court recognized that a lawyer's fees have an alimentary character, which is a fancy way of saying that, just like your pension, they are a form of sustenance. They are how the lawyer feeds their family. This gives legal fees a very special status. And the power of that ruling is pretty significant. Because legal fees are considered sustenance, if a retiree gets their back pay but then fails to pay their lawyer, the courts have the power to order an embargo on their future pension payments, up to a limit of 20% each month until that legal debt is fully settled. So, after all this, what's the big takeaway? The system is complex, and yeah, delays are pretty common. But the real key to getting through it all comes down to 2 things: persistence and knowledge. Understanding these steps, knowing the potential roadblocks ANSYS might throw up, and working closely with your lawyer, that is the path to finally securing the justice you already won in court. And all of this leaves us with one last thought to chew on. The fact that you can win a right in a court of law and then have to go back to court all over again just to make that right a reality, what does that say? Does that reflect a deeper flaw in the system? It's a question worth thinking about long after you've finally collected every penny you're owed.